Hello, Trinity Tigers. Welcome to the Learning Together live webinar series as part of lifelong learning initiatives presented by Trinity University Office of Alumni Relations. I'm Kirsten Andresen, class of 2017, a PhD student in physics at Johns Hopkins University, working in experimental soft matter. Trinity's Office of Alumni Relations has invited me to moderate tonight's webinar featuring a panel of young alumni working in science and technology fields, otherwise known as STEM. It is my distinct pleasure to present the panelists and introduce them in alphabetical order. Aparna Gomez, class of 2014, earned a Master's of Public Health degree from Yale University and proudly calls herself a Jill of all trades. She has volunteered as a medical interpreter in Honduras, served as a bilingual anatomy assistant for Trinity Professor Emeritus Robert Blystone, and worked as a research assistant in Yale New Haven Hospital's pediatric ICU. She currently works for Analysis Group, an economic consulting firm where she focuses on pharmaceutical market access and commercial strategy. Andrea Katz, class of 2011, earned her PhD in Cornell University's Applied and Engineering Physics Department, where she developed new methods and instrumentation for studying biological molecules. She is currently a physicist at Kimball Physics, working to develop electron and ion sources for research projects both on Earth and in space. Faith Ozer, class of 2015, earned a Master's of Public Health degree from the University of Michigan, where she published work on intimate partner violence, disclosure, and provider bias. At the start of the pandemic, Faith was recruited through a CDC contractor to work at the Anchorage, Alaska Department of Global Migration and Quarantine. She has since moved into a permanent position at the State of Alaska DHSS section of Public Health Nursing as a health informaticist, where she analyzes COVID vaccination rollout across the state and other health projects. And finally, we have Kristin Raja, class of 2010, who serves as a commissioned officer of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She is one of 95 women in STEM around the world selected to participate in the prestigious Homeward Bound Development Program in 2019. It is a groundbreaking global leadership initiative set against the backdrop of Antarctica, which aims to heighten the influence and impact of women making decisions that shape our planet. Now, let me turn our attention to Aparna Gomez. Let us know how you've come to where you are from Trinity, beginning with your Trinity experience and finding a job out of college.
Thanks, Kirsten. I'm very excited to be here today. So going back to Trinity, I was class of 2014, as you mentioned, and I came to Trinity as an international student, majoring in biology, intending to go into medical school. So I was in the pre-med track. So during my first 2 to 3 years at Trinity, I worked closely with Dr. Robert Blystone. As you mentioned, I was his TA for his bilingual anatomia class. And I also did research with Dr. Murphy on animal behavior, and I was involved in the International Club. I was the first year liaison my freshman year, and then I was co-president my sophomore and junior year. So when I entered my junior year, I realized that as an international student, it would be really tricky to get into medical school. So I started thinking about other career opportunities. During my junior year, Dr. Blystone invited me to a global health seminar where another alum, Allison Rosewood, was speaking. And after that talk, she actually reached out to Dr. Blystone and said, hey, I would like to connect with the Indian looking girl who has a Hispanic accent. That's what I didn't know my name. I was in the audience asking questions. So long story short, Allison ended up helping me get an internship at her office. She happened to be in the office of the Secretary of Health and Human Services in DC. So while I was thinking of what to do with my career, now that I wasn't pre-med and I didn't want to do bench research or more of the traditional biology paths, I started doing this internship with her at her office. And I realized that everybody in the office had the letters MPH after their name. So I asked Allison, what is an MPH? And she introduced me to the field of public health. So I came back to Trinity after that internship, and I became involved in other initiatives, including working actually with Faith to start the global health minor at Trinity. So that was my first foray into public health. And out of college, I worked in El Paso on US-Mexico border health before going into my MPH at Yale School of Public Health. So, and then during my MPH, my biggest question was, okay, well, for the longest time, I thought that being an MD was my dream job. What is it now? And I knew I wanted to be in the health field, and I knew that I wanted to make an impact. So instead of looking for my ideal job title, I started looking for my ideal job description. And this took me to several internships and externship experiences, including at Yale New Haven Hospital, as you said, as well as nonprofits, insurance systems, hospitals. So when the time came to apply to jobs out of grad school, I applied to all the ones that I interned at, but I also applied to a consulting job. And what I didn't realize is that in my attempt to figure out where I fit in the US healthcare system, I have become a Jill of all trades. So for a consulting company, that's really attractive because now I have a little bit of experience in everything. And that shows that I am able to learn. I think that's one of the biggest things I learned at Trinity, how to learn. So I started an analysis group 4 years ago. I specialize in market access and commercial strategy. So that's a very niche space of the pharmaceutical life cycle. A lot of people know that the FDA approved drugs. So once those drugs are approved, the next step is actually to talk to insurance companies and payers, including the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services that cover drugs for the population who's covered by Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP, depending on the state, to get the drug covered and reimbursed. So my job now at Analysis Group is pretty much to assess the value of pharmaceutical drugs. So it takes different forms. Sometimes I build economic models that pretty much showcase why is it worth or not worth paying an X amount for a dose or a drug. Other times I put together encyclopedias called dossiers for insurance companies where I explain the need for a drug, the disease space, but then also review their clinical trial data and explain the mechanism of action of the drug, how it's different from the other competitors in the market, and why it's worth covering this drug. So it takes different spaces, and every now and then I also get to work with patient groups to put forth their patient narrative, their patient experience navigating the US healthcare system. I work in other European, Asian markets too, but most of my work is in the US. So that's what, starting as pre-med biology at Trinity, what I do now, 6-7 years after graduating.
Could you tell us how all these roads lead back to your Trinity experience?
Yeah, actually. So I appreciate that you asked that, because when I left Trinity, I thought, I'm done being pre-med. I'm not sure how I will use my biology degree. And it turns out that in this job, that's the degree I use the most, because, my chemistry classes, my organic chemistry with Dr. Erbach, my biology classes, my physics classes, all that applies to understanding the clinical trial data that I then paraphrase and synthesize for the insurance companies. The other thing I learned at Trinity was just how to adapt and learn. With the small class sizes, I was very confident walking up to a professor and saying, or a TA, I don't understand, can you explain me? And I think that's the biggest part of being a consultant, asking the right questions. So between having the academic STEM training and having been empowered to interact with faculty and other students, Trinity actually set me up for this job really well. And I think the other thing, interestingly, is that Trinity has the common curriculum. We're a liberal arts school, right? So the common curriculum, as part of it, my last semester, I took microeconomics. And that was my introduction to economics that led me to taking more classes in grad school to set me up for this economic consulting job.
Okay, could you also talk about the road ahead?
Sure. Having in the last 6-7 years pivoted quite a few times, I don't know what the road ahead will look like, but I can tell you that what I've learned is that nothing you learn goes to waste. So right now, I'm still doing the same that I did at Trinity, learning transferable skills because I don't know in what shape or form I might be able to use them in the future, and really just staying passionate about healthcare. That's what brought me to Trinity. And that's why I'm still in the space, because I get to work in healthcare in a way that's very impactful to patients.
Thank you for now, Parna. We'll come back to you in the Q&A. And Andrea Katz, it's now your turn. So could you please tell us your story, including starting with the organization that you work for and the mission and values that guide your work?
Sure. So I have recently started a new job within the past year, and it's an awesome job. I love it. I am a physicist working at Kimball Physics, which is a small company in Wilton, New Hampshire. And we make electron and ion sources for a bunch of different applications, things like electron guns all the way to, thrusters for satellites. So it's pretty cool. It's a small company and it's a very neat campus. It's in a 1762 barn and a bunch of really cool farmhouses in the woods. And the thing that I really, really love best about it is the mission statement of the company, which kind of aligns really closely with some values and goals that I've always had. So the Kimball Physics mission is to advance humankind by doing good physics. And that's something that kind of governs everything we do there. We have a lot of customers that come to us and they need custom solutions to help them do all sorts of applications. And it's really nice to be able to kind of through them be able to do work in all these diverse areas of science. So I'm really enjoying my work there. And before that, I was a graduate student in Cornell's Applied and Engineering Physics department. I was a PhD student in Lois Pollock's Biophysics Research Group. And there we developed new tools, new instrumentation and methodology to study biological molecules. And the hope was that if you could understand more about the molecule, you might learn something about things going on in your body or be able to better help people who are getting sick. So it's a change of field for me between the last two roles, but the governing principle is the same.
Could you tell us about your particular role at Kimball Physics?
Yeah, so I see myself as kind of an innovator, an engineer, if you will. I spend a lot of time kind of helping develop new products and kind of helping to improve existing ones. And I'm always kind of tinkering, trying new things, kind of making new technology. And it's a little bit of an interesting path for me to have gotten to this point. If you'd told me in college that I would have said that was my role, I would have thought you were crazy. I had a lot to learn. So as a Trinity undergrad, I was actually studying astrophysics, and I had so many great experiences there that were really formative to me. I got to go on an observing trip at a big observatory on Kitt Peak. It was just amazing. But I kind of had this little nagging feeling that maybe I would be able to make more of a difference if I studied something that could help people closer to home. So I took the leap and I went to grad school in applied physics, and I joined a biophysics group and kind of quickly realized the area where I could make a difference would be to develop these new tools to allow us to study molecules in new ways. And I had to learn a lot to be able to do that. I took a machine shop class. I spend a lot of time, I still do, in the machine shop making a bunch of metal parts. I took some clean room training. I spent a lot of time etching little sample cells out of silicon, all sorts of things like that. So once I kind of got my hands on these things and learned that I could build things and make new devices and technology, the experiments kind of took off. And I've actually done experiments all around the world using devices that I've made myself. In California, in Germany, and Japan, I've worked with a lot of great collaborators. It's been awesome. So ultimately I graduated, and then it was time for me to leave Cornell, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. And I was honestly a little nervous about finding a job, but I really lucked out and I found this great company whose mission statement so well matches my own. And it was another change of field for me. It was like going from astrophysics to biophysics to now go from biophysics to making these electron and ion sources. And there was, again, a lot to learn. But what I found was a bunch of the skills that I already had were transferable. So the machine shop experience I had allowed me to kind of quickly jump in and prototype new parts. But the biggest thing is, like Aparna said, just learning how to learn and knowing that you can quickly gain these new skills and figuring out how to best use those to help your company. So that's kind of my role as I see it.
Could you tell us about the road ahead for you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I am still pretty new at Kimball. I've been there about 10 months. So a lot of what I'm doing right now is learning all I can, trying to get up to speed on electron optics and ion optics. But I also am, right now I'm working on several kind of custom products where a customer has come to us and said, I need this solution geared like very specifically for what I'm working on. And I'm very excited about those. I also do a fair amount of kind of trying to optimize existing products to maybe make them more efficient or easier to build. So, you know, I'm learning all I can and trying to contribute and give back. And I'm just very excited to continue to learn and grow with this company.
And how has your Trinity experience prepared you for where you are now?
Well, I feel very strongly that my Trinity experience was essential for getting me where I am now. And I guess I'm going to put in another plug in favor for the common curriculum, which I guess is called Pathways now. But, you know, when I was an undergrad, I did my fair share along with my classmates of complaining that I had to take courses outside of science that I wasn't really comfortable taking. But the truth is that was really good for me. And the thing that is great about it is it forces you to learn things that are outside of your comfort zone. And it kind of teaches you how to do that and gives you that experience. And then when you're out of Trinity and you are in your job and you need to learn something that's outside of your comfort zone, that's not the first time you face that. So it was really important for me just teaching me how to learn new things and new diverse things. And I think that's given me a really solid foundation that's allowed me to kind of overcome these challenges.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. We'll see you again in the Q&A as well. Let me now present Faith Ozer. So Faith, could you let us know about the organization you work for and the mission and values that guide your work?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Faith and I was class of 2015 at Trinity University. I currently work in Alaska for their State Department of Health and Social Services in the section of public health nursing. I am not a nurse. I could not pass chemistry and was pre-med like Aparna, but obviously much less successful pre-med. So I went the public health route and currently work as their health informaticist. So essentially my job is to interpret health data and help sort of explain it to senior leadership so they can guide resources into the right areas for the vaccination rollout. And a lot of what I do is focused on health equity and making sure that Alaskans all over Alaska and with the very unique population we have here and the unique challenges have the same access to healthcare and in specific the COVID vaccine, and that the state is doing everything that they can to sort of bridge any gaps. So my job is to point out the gaps and I've really enjoyed it so far. Before this, I worked at the CDC Department of Global Migration and Quarantine, which sounds a lot more intense than it is. I did not have to quarantine anybody, but I did learn a lot about contact tracing and how to do that across international borders and state borders, and how to call somebody to keep them from getting on an airplane when you know they're COVID positive, and a lot of skills that I've used recently. So it's been an interesting journey to get where I've gotten, but I've really loved working for the state of Alaska so far.
And could you tell us about the road ahead for you?
Yeah, so in all honesty, most of what I can say about the road ahead comes from what I've learned to expect up until now, and that's that I have absolutely probably no control over that, but that I found a place to live that I love, and I'd like to stay in Alaska. I love serving this population and its specific challenges, and I hope to find a permanent position in the state where I can continue to help coordinate programs statewide. And specifically, I'd like to get back into the realm of infectious disease and people experiencing homelessness. and just get it back into that realm and sort of making data a tool that people and nurses, healthcare providers, program coordinators, everybody can use to inform themselves and inform their programs every day in a live way, rather than 5 years down the road, once something's published, use that data to inform. So just making it part of the everyday practice and using data the gold standard for public health is really important to me. So any position where I can do that is where I'd like to be.
And how has Trinity prepared you for where you are now?
Yeah, so like I said, I went into Trinity expecting to be pre-med, but it definitely did not work out that way. I've learned to play my strengths, and I learned very quickly that my strengths were not in hard sciences, but rather in explaining the hard sciences, which I enjoy much more. So I got into anthropology, and specifically medical anthropology. And then I also worked at the school newspaper and had a bazillion jobs while I was at Trinity. I highly recommend using opportunities like Aparna did. I actually met Allison Rosewood, and she helped me get in on one of my internships for HHS in Washington, D.C. And using those experiences to find and build skills that you're good at, and also learn the skills that you're not so good at and where you may not want to live or what you may not want to do. It's just as equally important. And I think Trinity had a ton of opportunities where otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do what I did. I studied abroad in South Africa, which was an amazing experience. And it really got me devoted into race equity work, especially around HIV/AIDS and infectious disease. And then I was able to sort of project that after graduation into a study program in Vietnam, where we did a mixed methods ethnography under Dr. Montoya, and we were able to study sort of the way funding and international organizations affect the HIV response there. And it was extremely rewarding and humbling. And through those experiences, I definitely learned not necessarily about the job that I wanted, because I truly believe that the job you'll end up in is you most likely don't know the name of yet. And I think it's important to stay open-minded about that. But I learned that like field work like that was not for me. It was lonely. And Trinity gave me that experience to learn, your strengths and weaknesses, and really to build those skills. Because if you're a learner, and chances are if you're at Trinity, you like to learn, you mostly can focus on building skills to bring you to different places to learn. And I think that's something that's carried me from my Trinity experience through every job interview I've ever had, is that I will tell people I may not be the subject matter expert in this subject, but I can tell you right now that I will work really hard to learn about it. And that's something that I think Trinity instills in their students. And I really do recommend sort of going into your field and expecting, some struggle, and kind of to embrace that, and to say like, how can I fall back on these skills that I know I'm good at and that I know I can rock, and go from there. And that Trinity gave me so much opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Faith. So I would like to remind everybody that you'll be able to submit your questions as you listen using the Q&A tab, and the panelists will be happy to answer them during the Q&A session. But we're now turning our attention to our final panelist, Kristin Raja. Kristin, could you tell us your story?
Hi, yes, definitely. I'm Lieutenant Kristin Raja, and I've been a commissioned officer in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for about 9.5 years. My primary role as a NOAA Corps officer is to facilitate the collection of environmental intelligence for the nation. I'd like to take you all on a brief journey through my adventures with the NOAA Corps with some slides. I drive NOAA research ships as a deck officer, and my NOAA Corps colleagues in aviation fly NOAA planes. Besides driving the ship, I wear a variety of other hats and manage logistics and safety concerns as an officer. These include being a diver, a rescue swimmer, and a shipboard firefighter. I majored in engineering at Trinity in order to apply technical knowledge to environmental problems. I see climate change as the biggest environmental challenge we face, and it has underpinned many of the missions I have supported. My first assignment was to NOAA ship Fairweather, which conducts hydrographic survey to measure ocean depths for safe navigation. In 2012, my ship was deployed to the Arctic to remap the ocean as the ice started to melt and open up new passages. We started in Kodiak and traveled all the way around Alaska to Canada on the north side and back, conducting these reconnaissance survey. That's our track line. We saw a few friends along the way, and occasionally we left the ship via small boat, and we got to explore the ice. One day we even took a break and we went swimming in the Arctic. This is one of the views out my office window on the bridge while standing watch one evening. I next moved out to Hawaii, where I ran a dive center to support NOAA's Pacific Island Fisheries Science Center. The Science Center's mission is to conduct research and monitoring programs that support the domestic and international conservation and management of living marine resources across the Pacific Islands. The areas in red show our region of responsibility. In 2017, I moved to California to serve as a vessel operations coordinator for the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. There I ran 2 vessels and facilitated about 35 projects per year, which in various ways monitor the human impact on our world. Currently, I serve as operations officer on NOAA ship Pisces. I stand watch and I facilitate all science projects that come aboard to use our platform.
Could you tell us about the roads ahead?
Definitely. So while all these monitoring missions keep me busy, what I'm really passionate about is climate solutions and helping the world achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. In 2018, I was accepted to the 4th cohort of Homeward Bound. This was a year-long leadership program which culminated in 99 women in STEM from 33 different countries meeting in Antarctica in the fall of 2019. Not something that is necessarily easy to do with COVID anymore. This was the largest expedition of women ever to go to Antarctica, a group of 112, including faculty. Outside of our official curriculum, I participated in a few acts of collective visibility on the ship. This is me with fellow climate reality leaders after presenting on climate change for a program called 24 Hours of Reality. During a certain 24-hour period, people all over the world present on climate change to their communities. With our presentation, all 7 continents were covered for that year's event. We also conducted a Fridays for Future climate strike. This was part of a worldwide movement for action on climate change, started in 2018 by a 15-year-old Swedish girl named Greta. The Homeward Bound program focused on leadership, collaboration, and visibility. This program helped me identify my values and ultimately helped me discover what I want to do next, work on climate solutions full-time. So I'll be leaving the NOAA Corps in a few months to pursue a master's in energy policy and climate at Johns Hopkins as my next step.
And could you tell us about how Trinity prepared you for where you are now?
Sure. So I had Dr. Leifer, and one of the engineering professors, very early on, and he showed us that we can do anything with an engineering degree from Trinity because it teaches us how to think logically and solve problems. I really consider it a degree in problem solving. And I've had a very different career path from most of my Trinity peers, but Dr. Leifer always encouraged me to pursue what I was interested in, even though it was different. And that included 2 different internships, taking a semester off to do one of those, studying abroad, lots and lots of different things that I just don't think would have been an option at another university. And then 10 years later, like well after graduating, he supported and encouraged me again with this big career change when I applied for the master's program at Johns Hopkins. I think Trinity provides an education that can take you wherever you want to go, even the Arctic and the Antarctic.
Thank you, Kristen. So now is the time for our audience questions. If you haven't done so already, please submit your questions using the Q&A tab. We're not using chat for submitting questions. So I'll now read out questions so that the panelists can answer them accordingly. So the first question is to Aparna and Faith. So what advice do you have for current MPH students unsure about what to do after graduation? There's so much to do with this degree in different fields. So can you offer some suggestions?
So it sounds like that's a current MPH student?
I believe so.
So I think it's play your skills. I think Faith made a really good point. I currently work with lots of Trinity students too. And what I tell them is, you know, an MPH is like an MBA. You have a core set of skills. You know how to understand epidemiological data. You take core classes in biostatistics, economics, health policy, healthcare management. So out of all those, what were you really good at? What did you get good grades in? And also, what did you really enjoy? What were the classes that made you want to take like the next level instead of just like stop at like the basic like 1100 or whatever, like level 1, 2 courses? And when you start from that, that helps you narrow down the job search. And then what I would encourage is think of an ideal job description. You know, for example, I did health policy, regulatory affairs, and global health, and I knew I was really good talking to people. I like talking to people. I also like, I have a better understanding of like clinical systems than most people, especially given my interpreter background. So I look for jobs that match that both technical skill set, but also my natural inclination to just like to talk and be social and work in the healthcare space. Faith, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually finished my MPH knowing what I liked and not knowing much else. I knew what I was good at, I knew what I liked, and then we ended up moving to Minnesota sort of on a fluke for my partner's job. There were so many jobs there and I got none of them. I was unemployed for 6 months after my MPH, and it was hard. And I think it is normal to prepare for that, these humbling moments in life that sort of help you recalibrate. And it was really important for me because I had a skill to fall back on. It's not a glamorous one, but I'm a bartender, and it paid the bills for those 6 months. And it also gave me an opportunity to sort of think about what I wanted my life to look like. We ended up moving again, and I ended up taking the first job I could in the public health field for the state of Texas. And it actually ended up being a great experience. I did not necessarily like my job, but I learned a ton about what I was good at and what data science is. And I was not a data nerd. I prefer mixed methods understanding, and I really love qualitative data. But I got into the other side of things, and it made me realize how good I am at applying numbers to real life. So I would just be open to your possibilities, and also don't be afraid to pick a place based on where you want to live. Sorry, the sun's in my eyes, but I had an unconventional thing moving here to Alaska. I did not want to work for the CDC necessarily, but I chose to because I knew I wanted to live here, and they called me. And that's okay. Like, know where you want to live. It's a huge part of life, and it's okay to pick where you want to go.
I think that's a good point. I think the other thing I would add, one is even the experiences where I thought were not particularly like fulfilling at the time ended up being really valuable because of that transferable skill. The other thing I would tell to the current MPH student is know the recruiting cycles. So different fields recruit at different times. For example, economic or any consulting companies, like whether it's like McKinsey, Bain, like the management ones, or the more like niche ones, they recruit the fall before they hire. So if they were to hire you in fall 2022, they would be recruiting fall of this year. Other companies or other fields like nonprofits and government actually hire that same semester. So if they want you in June, applications open in February. So talk to people in the field, look at LinkedIn postings to get a sense of what the recruiting cycle for each of these fields is.
Great. We have another question. Oh, and a thank you for Aparna and Faith. So another question for Andrea. So how did you prepare yourself for the transition from academia into the private sector as you finished up your PhD?
Well, that's a great question. So I had a little bit of an unconventional PhD experience where, you know, a lot of the other students in my research group and other groups would be very focused on trying to answer a scientific problem. So they would, you know, you would have a biomolecule you were studying and you wanted to know how it functions or something like that. Whereas I was more focused on developing new tools that could help us solve kind of a wide array of problems. And that right there already kind of biased me maybe more towards industry, in that I'm kind of, I was really developing products as a grad student. I was making microfluidic mixers, I was machining parts. But my advice for people who want to transition to industry, especially in a physics or an engineering field, is really, while you're in grad school, use every opportunity you can to learn these hand skills and get different experiences. And it's hard sometimes, you know, it was very intimidating for me taking a shop class and going into the machine shop. I mean, I'm the only woman I've ever seen in a machine shop. But, you know, I found that people were very helpful and I learned a lot, and that gave me a huge edge. That's a skill I use all the time. Things like, yeah, clean room skills, shop skills, at one point, and you can, you know, seek out these opportunities to learn things even in ways that aren't really advertised. So at one point I had someone at Cornell who taught me to use a polishing wheel that would normally be used to prepare electron microscopy samples, and I applied that to other things. So I would say just be open for every opportunity you can to learn, and anything in particular that, you know, might give you prototyping experience or any sort of idea into how things are manufactured or designed has been really helpful for me.
Thank you. So we're waiting for more questions to come in. In the meantime, I have a question for all panelists, really. But if you think back on when you were a student at Trinity, looking for what would be your next step after graduation, what resources helped you make your decisions? And do you have any advice for like current students interested in your fields?
Well, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I already answered the question. Go ahead, Kristen.
Just briefly, I actually really like what one of you already said about talking to people in the fields that you're interested in. That's actually some advice I've gotten more recently. I didn't really know all that back when I was a senior at Trinity about to graduate, but I do think it's really important to just reach out to people that are doing things that look interesting to you. And it can even be like, ideally you might have, you know, friends or contacts yourself, but you can just look on LinkedIn and find someone who looks like they're doing something you want to do and send them a short note. Ask them, hey, would you mind telling me about your job and what you do for 20 minutes on a phone call? And some of them might get back to you and become, you know, mentors or just interested parties in your career, and that's not a bad thing. I've definitely learned a lot from doing that in the past year or so.
And I would add to that, this is more of vulnerable, and I'm Kristen, absolutely. We all have 20 minutes, and I've had so many students, especially Trinity students that which I'm really excited about, reach out to me via LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw that you have a bio degree. I am majoring in biology. Can you like walk me through your leaps? So definitely, we all have 20 minutes. And the other thing, I think the more vulnerable answer is I don't think we've talked about Trinity being a small school. The largest class I was in was my intro, like bio gen chem classes, and those were like 60 students. But most of my classes were under 15 students. And it was my classmates that were my best friends and my professors that I seeked for, advice from. And to this day, my advisor, Dr. Blackstone, he calls me on my birthday and I call him on his. The thing about Trinity is, and the thing about pivoting is that I got discouraged a lot. There were lots of dead ends. There were a lot when I took a semester off as well. And I didn't think I would go back to Trinity. I enrolled in medical school in Honduras thinking that that was my career path. And actually it was professors from Trinity who reached out to my parents to tell them, get her back to school, she should finish her degree. And, my sister Nipuni went to Trinity, my best friend Taryn, they all just empowered me to get back up. And especially now during the pandemic, job searching is really hard. And I work on the recruiting side of things for my company too. And rely on your support systems. All of these panelists you see, whether in this webinar or anything else, we've all struggled. There's been so many times where we don't know what we're doing. And, Kirsten asked us, what are your next steps? None of us, only Kristen was able to say that she's going into a master's, right? Everybody else said, well, we don't know. We don't know what life will throw at us. So that rely on your support systems and just keep trying.
Yeah, something that I want to build on for that, Aparna, and I know you and I were both pretty good at this, like developing relationships with professors and stuff like that. I still talk to other alumni and they still help me get through these things. But also don't be afraid to find that line between present and annoying when you're asking for something. I found it very important as a master's student to show up at offices continuously, to ask for the work, to get that TA position, to get that job, to ask those questions. And I think Trinity really helped me have the confidence to be present in a way where I could approach my professors, and other people were very nervous to do so. And I'm sure there were times where they didn't love all my emails, but you know what? I also got the positions that I wanted. And when I didn't, I found something different. I would just really recommend anybody at Trinity to also just do the things that you want to do because you want to do them, and don't be self-conscious about asking for them. I think especially as women, we can be self-conscious about asking for these opportunities, for that extra training, for that extra time. Can you explain this? There's no reason for that. It's in our head. And I think being present for that is really important. And I would also just recommend that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, also have a job. Just have a job in undergrad. It helps you. It helps you learn a lot of things about balance and yourself. I worked for the newspaper and I had a different job. And honestly, the technical writing that I learned at the Trinitonium for 3 years helped me get my first 2 jobs in public health, just because a lot of people don't know technical writing. And it's important to sort of use those skills and cross apply them, because chances are you're not going to have all the experience for your dream job, but you're going to have some of the skills.
Yeah, and I think also to add to that, to Andrea's point, the common curriculum pathways forces you to be in fields and schools with students you wouldn't normally interact with. So, it was at Trinity that I learned to talk to business majors. And now I work in Silicon Valley, where entrepreneurship and innovation and business majors are most of my counterparts. I took an English class, and for Dr. Rando, but I took an English class as well. And I learned that I'm not that good at English literature. But all jokes aside, I think adding to that, I know I have a lot of counterparts who went to universities where they were siloed, like the School of Engineering or the School of Business, and Trinity doesn't do that. And I think that's where I first started learning how to talk to people whose lingo is a different language. How do I talk to business majors? How do I talk to comp sci majors? What are the engineers thinking? And I think even at the time, I didn't understand the value of the common curriculum forcing me to do that.
Okay, I have another question. This one is for Kristen. So how did you learn about and end up at NOAA?
Yeah, so my last semester at Trinity, at the beginning of it, I really had no idea what was next. And another Trinity student was a NOAA hauling scholar, and that includes an internship. So during his summer internship with NOAA, they told him about all these different programs that they have, including the NOAA Corps. And he thought of me. I think he may have even known about my interest in service. And he told me about him. And I got on the website, started talking to recruiters, and was very interested very quickly, and ended up joining shortly after graduating.
Okay, another question for all the panelists. Have there been challenges or resistance that you've encountered as a woman learning in STEM field, which is heavily male dominated? And how did you navigate that?
So I guess my field is probably stereotypically the one that's most male dominated is physics. But I've been really lucky, even as I've done these tasks that really a lot of my coworkers are male. I haven't really run into a whole lot of bias, and I found that most of what I do run into is actually in my head. You look around and sometimes there's a bit of a lack of role models. Sometimes there's not. I've been very fortunate to have a wonderful PhD advisor. Actually, Kimball's president is a woman. They're both great physicists. So I've had people to look up to, but the main thing is when I run into this, I have to realize I can do this, and so can you. You just don't let it get to you. Really, I found that almost everyone, regardless of gender, has just been happy to help and work together to come up with better science and benefit the company. So don't let it get you down, and full speed ahead, I'd say.
Yeah, Andrea, just to chime in about the role model thing, you came and gave a seminar to the Trinity Physics Department when you were a grad student, and I was a student there. So it was definitely very inspiring to see like the great work that you were doing as a grad student.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm really glad. So it's great. I mean, we can all help each other and we can all stick together. And that's a great thing about all being Trinity women here.
Okay, I have another question for all the panelists. So as you transition from school to your professional careers, what are some tools that you use to stay connected to what's happening in your field?
So I can start because consulting is, a lot of it is networking too. One of the lower hanging fruit is that I'm part of a lot of alumni clubs. And the biggest thing is, for example, there's Yale Women, and then Yale Women in Northern California. There's Trinity University, Bay Club, and San Antonio Club. So I stay connected to those. I also keep talking to my professors. A lot of my professors, and maybe it's to Faith's point that we were more extroverted or empowered to talk to professors, they're on my Facebook. I email them when I decided to go into my master's, but also when I decided to go into industry and consulting, I emailed Trinity professors to ask them what they thought and if they thought that I was a good fit for these industries. I still value their opinion. And every now and then, these professors will send students my way. The other thing I do to stay aware of what's going on in my field is that I'm part of professional societies. So some of these you have to pay membership. Other ones, like journals, a lot of academic journals have newsletters that they send out. And if you're careful about which newsletters you select so that you're not getting spammed, you actually get, like pretty tailored information every month or every week in your inbox that you can quickly skim to see if there's anything relevant to you.
Yeah, I agree with that, Aparna. I also found it really useful to try to bring it into my life in like the books that I read, the magazines that I read, like trying to look through the critical lens that I developed at Trinity when I do anything in any sort of hobby way. Like I still love reading ethnographies from anthropologists and I bring that in all the time. And then also yeah, bringing up these professional societies, I think, is really important, and being an active part. Also, not to backtrack, Kirsten, but just a plug when you're working in a field that's mostly men. My experience has been that you're going to encounter people who might be condescending to you, and I've had that happen recently. Like people ask me, like, "Why are you the one doing this?" And most of the time, that's way more their problem than it's yours. And I think just being confident to say, like, and I've had to do salary negotiations, and I think that's something that I never got to learn, but like as a woman, you don't have to feel ashamed to know your worth. And also to say, like, no, actually, I know my worth and I would like this salary, please, or I'd prefer this job description. And you don't have to, just because you're working in a science field and you're doing what is good for the world, feel like you don't deserve to get paid for it, because you still have to live your life. Like, and it's really important. And I think something as a woman that I had to build confidence for was knowing what my worth and my skill was, and that I didn't have to apologize for being at that table, that it was everybody else's problem to get used to, not mine.
Definitely. And to that point, much like Andrea's company, I'm lucky to be part of a company that really works to have have diversity, whether it's gender diversity, race diversity, class diversity. I'm a first generation student. But what I found, I'm often the only woman at table. I'm definitely the only woman of color at tables, including this panel. And what I found is that when sometimes it's me, I really have a bad imposter syndrome, but I have to remind myself why I'm there. And if it comes, like, if I'm not there because I'm a woman, I'm not there because my skin is brown, I am here because I am qualified. I have the academic degrees, I have the years of experience, I have the communication skills. And when I remind myself when I walk in through the door that that's why I'm there, I don't see the color or the sex of the other people in the room. I see all of our credentials there to work towards solving a problem. So, I haven't encountered people who are blatantly, trying to exclude me. And a lot of it is in my head because I am self-conscious, but I just remind myself of the credentials that I carry and why I'm here. And that, nobody gave me the job. I applied for it. I negotiated salary, I worked towards promotions, met metrics. But I think as women, even female colleagues, I've not found that. Like, I have junior colleagues who come to me being like, "Oh, Aparna, I don't mean, I know I just started, but I don't want to like get ahead of myself or seem like I think too highly of myself, but I really like the next promotion. How do I work for it?" And I'm like, wait, why did you need any of that preamble? There is a career trajectory where the next step is the promotion, and let's talk about it. So I just to echo what everybody said, a little bit it's in our head, but really just remind yourself why you're there. You're not there because of a diversity card. You're there because you're qualified.
Yeah, thank you both for going back to that question as well. I think this is a great discussion to have for this webinar. So I think we have time for one last question. So do you see a way to create a path at Trinity, like a support system to reach more Trinity students to share your unique experiences, since Trinity isn't always like known for science and technology, but like, maybe business and education?
So recently I reached out to the Career Services Office. I reached to a point in my career where I feel like I can give back now. And much like Allison helped Faith and me, I wanted to help someone else too. So the first thing I did was reach out to career services, and they connected me to alumni engagement. So Trinity actually has a separate alumni engagement office. And through that office, I've connected with multiple Trinity students and have been able to, have career chats or, more technical advice. Like I've helped someone prepare their MPH application. So Trinity actually has lots of resources for alums. On the student side, I did this in grad school. I wish I had done this in college, was go to the career service office, the same place that alumni can connect to or can reach out to connect to students. It's where students should go to connect to alumni. So go to the career services office, go to the alumni engagement office, because that's where we're knocking to like figure out how we can help you. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
I was gonna echo that a little bit. Yeah, I really recommend also speaking to your professors. I got some great advice when I was debating if I was going to go to graduate school or not, if I was going to do a PhD or a master's. And I had one professor like very blatantly say, like, if you don't know that you want to teach, don't get a PhD in this. And I was like, oh, well, I know that I probably don't want to teach, so let's start with a master's. And that's where I went, and it made a ton of more sense for me. And then while I was there, I asked people what they did and asked about their experience in different fields besides academia, and just tried stuff. And honestly, I do believe that you will find a job that you don't know the job title for yet, because I didn't know my job existed when I was there. I didn't know this was an opportunity. And the same for my partner. Like, this is not what they majored in. And chances are it won't be, but you have to be open to looking at that and sort of seeing how you can make it work for you, for it to work. But yeah.
And I know we're almost at time, but I see one more question from Emma asking so she could tell her students. And it goes right to Faith's answer. What would you tell students who are thinking about pivoting? Back to Faith's answer, you're way more qualified to pivot than you think. Faith talked about the newspaper, that's technical writing. I was an international club, that's, recruiting or not recruiting, like fundraising and like event organizing. I also obviously bio major skills, like the technical skills, healthcare management. Dr. Kaisi took us to a hospital. That's where I first learned about dialysis machines. All these things that you think are kind of random experiences make you qualified to pivot. So instead of thinking of, oh, I thought I was going to be pre-med, now I'm not going to be a doctor, what do I do? Start writing your job description instead of your job title, because you'll find that you have a lot more skills than you think you do.
Yeah, I would just add, I really agree with everything that Aparna just said. I would also add, have confidence in your ability to learn, because that's something that Trinity teaches you very well. Mm-hmm. And if you're thinking about pivoting and you feel nervous about it, know that you do know how to learn new things and you do have those transferable skills, and go for it.
I would also just say, even as you're at Trinity, if you're a current student, look for internships that are interesting to you, whether they're in the summer or not, and just apply. Talk to your professor, see if it'll work to do something that's out of the norm or different. Go talk to the study abroad office, see what looks interesting there. I definitely carved my own path, during undergrad and afterward, and it really just started with what looks interesting and asking questions, and one step at a time.
And one thing we haven't talked about is how do we finance all this, which is a whole seminar on its own. But to Kristin's point, talk to your professors, because they may know about funding sources you don't. So for that first internship in DC, where I discovered public health, I got a stipend from the Mexico, Americas, and Spain program, MAS, at Trinity. And that's how I paid for my rent in DC. So I didn't know about that. And I didn't realize that because I was working in the Americas team in the Office of Global Health in HHS, I would be qualified for that scholarship. So that's another thing about funding. Talk to professors. The librarians actually know a lot about funding sources. And again, this is a whole separate like conversation, but a lot of my earlier experiences were funded by scholarships that professors told me about.
Just to jump on that, I know we're almost out of time, but I absolutely agree. Like, funding is absolutely such an issue, and don't be afraid if you don't know. Like, if you're not sure, don't necessarily then just keep going to grad school if you're not sure you want to go to grad school for it. Don't be afraid to take that gap year. I was so afraid to take a gap year. I felt like I was failing, but I wasn't. And my gap year changed my life. I did an internship at the AIDS Foundation in San Antonio while I also bartended 40 hours a week. And it was hard, but it was really good work. And it helped me save money. It helped me get my head on where I needed to be and take that mental rest. So I went into grad school like running, and it felt so much better because I had the opportunity to focus on those applications and where I wanted to go and what I wanted my life to be at. So make sure that if you're not positive, like if you don't have an idea that gives you a good feeling about it, like take that rest. Like just say like, you know what, I don't have to make this decision when I'm 21. Like I can take a second and sort of see what's out there.
And most of my classmates, like there was a very strong relationship between prior work experience between college and grad school and how much people got out of grad school. Taking some time off was the best thing I did too. So, and it actually helps you be a stronger student during grad school.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar conversation with our young alumni involved in STEM. So you must be thrilled and inspired from these stories as I am. For additional Learning Together content, including other webinars, podcasts, and book club information, please visit the Lifelong Learning page on the alumni site. Go Tigers!